Since we last spoke to you at the very beginning of this administration, how have your expectations and hopes changed for your company for the next 4 years?
Well, certainly I was expecting something to happen a little sooner than it has, but we are still very optimistic that we will see an infrastructure bill later this year. We have broad bipartisan support in Washington for an infrastructure bill. We have broad support at the state and local level, and we have broad taxpayer support. So I'm quite confident that we will see an infrastructure bill later this year.
There's lots of support perhaps, but there's a lot of procedure to get through, and there's all sorts of legislation that's already being held up due to investigations and, obstructionism and just a lack of momentum in Washington. Does that concern you?
Of course it does. We have seen lack of momentum in Washington. It does concern me. But I think there is broad bipartisan support on both sides of the aisle for some pared-down version of tax reform and a pared-down infrastructure bill. And I think if we put both of those bills together, we can get the right support to get something done this year. What
parts of the president's budget proposal regarding infrastructure do you think have the most chance at life?
Well, certainly the proposal to allocate $200 billion of money to leverage private sector investment and leverage state investment is the most important part of that bill. We've seen the blueprint for that in the past. We saw a blueprint for that with the low-income housing credits that were done 2 decades ago. So we know it works to incent and leverage private sector investment and state and local investment. So that's the most important part of the bill. But that's only one part of the solution. Another important part of the solution that's starting to get some momentum is an increase in the federal fuels excise tax. We haven't seen an increase in the federal fuels tax in 24 years. And if we could just adjust that for the inflation over that 24-year period of time, we'd produce a $27 billion additional fund for transportation infrastructure in this country.
Mike, have you had conversations with the president?
I have not had direct discussions with the president, but I have had many discussions with the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Transportation, and other members of the White House that are focused on infrastructure. We've been putting our message forth. We've been helping them formulate their policy around this, and they've been very receptive to input from the private sector.
Right, and what kind of projects have you already put tender in on?
Oh, we have tens of thousands of projects around the world at any given point in time. But we did produce a study for the Treasury Department back in December of the top 40 projects, infrastructure projects in this country that we think should move forward as a priority. Those projects we estimate will produce 3 to 4 times their cost in economic benefit to the communities and produce the kind of jobs that we need in this country.
Can you give us some examples, some geographies, and exactly what kinds of projects?
Sure. The Gateway Tunnel in New York is a great example. I'm here in New York today, obviously, and the Gateway Tunnel to improve the flow of people, both people that are working in the city and tourists in and out of the city, will reduce the friction on the economy of New York, and that is an example of the very critical infrastructure that needs to get done right now.
Mike, I have to ask you about the border wall. It was definitely a project that you were going to be involved in. How is that progressing?
We are not involved in the border project. We provide those type of services for governments around the world. We have for decades, but we are not currently involved in the border project.
Why not? What happened?
We did not bid on the project. It wasn't in our sweet spot in its current format.
Okay, and do you imagine that it will go ahead, though? It might not be in Aecom's sweet spot, but were there proposals that might be reasonable?
Oh, I think there's something will go ahead in some format, but it probably won't be the size and scale that was originally advertised.